Today on Bold Agendas, I'm joined by Nicolas Waern. He's the CEO of WINNIIO, a guest lecturer at Oxford, co-chair of the Digital Twin Consortium's Manufacturing Working Group, and one of the most forward-looking voices on digital twins, AI, and organizational design. Nicolas's work spans manufacturing, healthcare, smart buildings, and cities. He's known for moving digital twins far beyond static dashboards and reframing them as living, participatory environments where humans and AI co-create, test, and scale new futures. What sets Nicolas apart is how he connects technology to leadership and culture. He challenges us to see organizations as living systems, tuned to the world as it is, informed by the world as it was, and designed to create value in the world that must be. I'm Mimi Brooks, and this is Bold Agendas, recording reality and shaping the future, with Nicolas Waern on digital twins, AI, and the living enterprise. Let's get started. Nicolas, welcome to Bold Agendas. Thank you for being here. I can't tell you how delighted I am that you said yes to come on and talk to my audience. They're going to love this.
Thank you so much. No, pleasure to be here. Phenomenal. Really appreciate the research that you've done. Extremely impressive. I used to have my podcast. I never did, a semblance of the amount of research that you've done. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you saying that. I love doing the podcast. I really started it, to do the stakeholder capitalism thing, best ideas, and globally. And I appreciate you coming on, working with me on hours since you're coming in from Sweden today. And so I love it. But I have to tell you, it's a lot more work if you want to ask good questions.
Yeah, I know.
So I just want to tell my audience real quick, because I think that, most of my folks might not be familiar with you and your work. And I found you online. I was actually looking for somebody that had something important to say and emerging ideas on digital twin organizations. It's a big concept, that I care about a lot in my world as we think about, what are future organizational systems and structures and the systems of culture and leadership and relationships, et cetera. So I sent my folks out to go find me somebody that understands this concept and can come talk to me. And they found you, and I was able to read through a lot of your white papers online, and I loved what you were saying. So thank you for coming. It really was a cold call like that, and you were gracious in answering my LinkedIn reach out. And on that note, Nicolas, I want to give you the floor just for a couple of minutes so people understand the work you do. You've got, your finger in a lot of pies here, and, both in companies of your own and in participation in industry consortiums. So can you take a minute and just talk about it, and maybe in your mind how it all fits together, if it does?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And a minute, it's a bold agenda for me to keep it short to 1 minute. But what do I do? I start from where I'm doing right now. So the whole point of digital twins is that you have reality, that's the focus. So let's say the entire planet, that's my focus area, right? So then you understand, that it's pretty vast, but it's not just working with reality or the planet itself, it's the digital copy. So the digital twin of the entire planet. So the platforms that I'm using and also on the board of, they have these, like Google Earth platforms, and that allows me to zoom out in the beginning of the day. And then maybe I have a call in Australia, then I can zoom in to Brisbane, because that's where the Olympics is going to happen in 2032. Or I have some partners who are working in Melbourne, and then I talk to them, and then I zoom out, and then maybe have a call with someone in California, and then I zoom in to that area. And that's basically how my day works, right? And for me, what I'm focusing on right now is digital twins of people. So it's actually started with my mother-in-law getting, cancer diagnosis, and she realized that she didn't have all the information in one place. And that's sort of what excites me the most, that you have all this fragmented information, and that's in every industry. It doesn't matter when, we're working with smart buildings, in construction, in factories, in automation, in whatever it might be. The information is just scattered everywhere. Different systems, the knowledge is in people's heads. And the most pressing issue, I believe, is with people and health and longevity. So that's really what I'm doing right now, to have decentralized health journals that everyone would have their own information in one place, and also generate the data that the world needs when it comes to contextual aspects, so we can bring better medicines to market faster. And that is the point with digital twins, that you have a digital copy of yourself, your home, the factory, or the entire planet. So if we could have had this conversation, maybe you had your digital twin that has been trained on all your podcasts, everything that you've done. That would meet up with my digital twin. And maybe we had this podcast, session 1,000 times. And then you do that with AI agents. So you match that with an audience, and you had this podcast 1,000 times screened against 100,000 of people. And they would have said, okay, this episode where you didn't talk about this, but something else, that is the best one. And that's the one that we're going to release. And then you and I wake up and say, wow, you had an amazing podcast episode. Do you want to release it? Yes or no? And then maybe we didn't have this conversation. So again, maybe that's, not necessarily everything that I work with, but that's the whole concept, that you're working with digital copies of reality. And yes, I'm advising on this for digital twins of people, digital twins of horses in the equestrian industry to make a one-click claim for the insurance companies. I advise, big companies in terms of national digital twin strategies for construction. And I'm also, one of the more important things that I've been doing the last 4 years is participate in the Digital Twin Consortium. So that's where I learned a lot in terms of what big companies, small companies in energy, healthcare, construction, more or less everything are doing. And I'm also the working group lead, co-chair for the manufacturing one, telecoms one, and hopefully soon also starting up a quantum one. So quantum computing, quantum security, because it's not only about security, but also quantum computing and how to accelerate value in almost all industries. But right now it's a lot about security. That wasn't 1 minute, so sorry about that.
That's okay. No. That, I think it's very helpful. And, it seems to me that, not to over belabor it, but it seems to me that it's kind of the methodology and approach that you take that makes what you do, I want to say, naturally a horizontal. You can take it and apply it, in a lot of industries and contexts, because it has a funny way of being ubiquitous in terms of how you might redesign anything, including my podcast, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Right? No, definitely. And I think that's the problem with digital twins, that it's a digital copy of anything in reality. So it's the same in every industry, because you're working with reality as the backdrop.
So let's dive into this a little bit, because, you're starting to write a lot more, I notice, almost daily, right? You kind of have
I'm trying.
You're trying to. I saw you committed yourself. I'm like, oh, big commitment. Get something out every day. But I think you're a prolific writer anyways, from a thought leadership perspective. And I want to go through a couple of your ideas and have you give them some context for me. Absolutely. So the idea that, when we say, well, what's the definition or one of them of digital twins? And you say that digital wins equals digital twins if done correctly. What do you mean when you say that?
That's a good question. I think that there's a lot of digital transformation efforts, that goes on in every minute. I think now, of course, AI, and when I say AI, it's also LLM hype, like large language models, which are basically words strung together to sound like it's phenomenal. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. But there's also the transformation side in terms of knowledge, in terms of people, right? So I see it as, there's data on this side. There's hopefully impact that you want to create on one side. But what's missed out on is knowledge, right? So let me, take this for instance. Yesterday, we had a workshop here in Sweden, and that was about critical infrastructure, digital twins of hydropower plants, in how we can turn from where they are today to something that is super secure, intelligent, and then, can communicate with everything else. But in the workshop, there was also a construction site, outside. And one of the people that I work with, he's been, doing construction sites for, 25 years. And he was just looking at the site, 1 second. And he immediately said, they have problems, right? No real-time data, no sensors, no AI, no nothing. Just an expert that knows what he or she or they are talking about, that can look at a construction site and just say this doesn't work, right? Because, everything was a little bit in disarray. Some people were sitting down. There were containers, all over the place, and they were doing things in the wrong order. And I think that's what people are missing out. So digital twins that we should lead them to digital twins is where you can combine information from systems, from the planet. So you have map data, geographical information system data, but also knowledge. And knowledge comes from people. So there was a discussion now, I think it was the other day, or I think it was a comment that I made that had like a couple of 10, 20 likes. It's basically a dumb 3D model, or even a picture, to be honest. If you have that, and you have, again, a couple of experts around it, they can figure things out 99% times faster than if we go at it with a data-driven strategy. We want to get sensors in there. We need to do this. We need to do this. Oh, okay, the data is not great, right? We need to structure it. We need to find the standards. Oh, shit, there are like 500 standards in here. Then you're, 200 consultants, 500 PowerPoint decks, so much data that you wouldn't know what to do, when you should start with reality and a picture of reality, preferably in 3D. So you can just go in there, you have experts, you can talk about whatever that might be together, and then you can find out, okay, what is the most immediate problem that we need to focus on? So let me give you an example. Let's take a factory, right? So we were in the call this morning with one of the largest manufacturing groups here, well, in the world, but based in the Nordics. And they have, what did they say, like 20 different factories and different, digitalization levels. And if you go into a factory, they might have 5 or 6 initiatives ongoing at any given point in time, but they're siloed, right? Someone is responsible for something. Someone is responsible for heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Someone else is responsible for an AI strategy. Someone else is responsible for looking at one of the cells to understand, are the robots actually getting close to people? What are we supposed to do about that? And another one is automated guide vehicles. Basically, these robots that, shuffle products, in the production, outside, inside, and all this kind of stuff. And they were worried about, what happens if one of the automated guide vehicles, the robots, they run out of energy. The battery drains, right? They're going to get stopped, in the middle. There's going to be a traffic jam, and that's going to cost so much money. But all of these are just being run as independent efforts. Whereas what I said, okay, scan the entire factory, and they already had the scan. Okay, perfect. Let's use that then. Plan this and use the 3D model of the factory as a project portal, right? Okay, Mimi, you were responsible for this area. You were responsible for this, for this, for this, for this. And just do daily or weekly reporting in so we understand the progress. Instead of completely separate silos, no one really knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And what you also can do is then just add cameras, to the factory. You combine that with the 3D model, and now you can record reality. So anything that will happen here, starting NSS, you can just record that. And then after a week of, recording reality, you can see how people are moving. You can zoom in to where, the people are they actually close to the robots in the manufacturing cell? But you can also zoom out again. You don't need to zoom out to the entire planet, but you can zoom into where the augmented guide vehicles are. And you can use AI vision to say, like, identify all the AGVs and see how they're moving, right? And then someone could just say, okay, let's bring in the building information models from the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. And let's also overlay what systems we're actually using. And then let's visualize where the data actually is going, right? Same picture, just a 3D model. And you don't have any sensors yet. Nothing.
Right.
But you can still get to a point where everything is cohesive. Everyone is now working in a shared reality. And you can just make decisions so much better just by involving different experts. And that's knowledge, right? That's the knowledge that you get from 25 years of working with HVAC systems or AI. So that's the whole concept of where digital twins, it starts with, the reality. It doesn't start with the real-time data. It doesn't start with that, depending on how you see it. So I think that's how you get a digital win, because you also factor in not just the data, but the organization, the culture, the processes, the people, the hierarchy. The ones that are actually working here, they're the ones that are supposed to lead the change, where humans need to be in control. AI should be in the loop. Right now, it's the other way around. AI is trying to take some control. It's LLMs, it's hallucinating. and then you're trying to do stuff, and you're stuck in a big data lake that
Right.
turns into a data swamp, and
Yeah,
you
this
never get to
overemphasis
the
on
impact.
data.
It's
Exactly.
crazy. It's
Exactly.
crazy.
I feel like this was one of your ideas that really drew me to your thinking. And that is, if I synthesized some of what you're saying, it's the relevance of the current state, right, Nicholas?
Yeah.
Because I run into this a lot in my consulting practice that, there's not a good beat on how work really gets done as a result of the hierarchies and the silos. So
Yeah.
really what you are describing in a lot of ways is trying to remove the opaqueness, if you will, of our organizational systems and structures,
Yeah.
that trap important ideas about how work is getting done and
Yeah.
what are
Absolutely.
people doing that are clearly the glue, in our operations today critically. I,
Yep.
I mean, that seems to me like a very important idea because often I feel like where leaders are starting is trying to define the future state
Yeah.
without being right, without
Yeah. Yeah.
being clear
Absolutely.
on how the current state works today. And you're suggesting, a process for
Yeah. It
getting
goes
value
back
out of the current
to
state.
no, absolutely. I mean, thank you, Mimi. I should have you in all my meetings, I think. But and maybe I could have your digital twin and pay for it as well, right?
There
But
you go.
no, I think it's like, well, there are three things that comes to mind. The first one is Plato. Plato's cave.
Yeah.
That allegory that everyone is, in this cave. We don't really know what's happening, and we're just looking at the shadows, and that's basically it, right? That's the whole point. That you record reality, you get an immutable truth to say, like, this is exactly, or this is actually what's going on in the factory, right? No one can sort of, they're not looking at shadows anymore, and shadows in this case means different applications, right? The factory floor manager, they're looking at some MES systems, the energy person looking at some KPIs, the economy person's never seen the factory, they're just seeing, like, the numbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the shadows which we live in. But by recording reality, we can, finally hold hands. We can look at reality as it is and step out of that cave, or we can look at the cave together, right? So I think, like,
Yeah.
that's one thing, and it's also the Clayton Christensen jobs to be done theory. I believe that in order to get to jobs to be done, we already know that. You want to succeed with AI. You want to save money, make more money, find new revenue streams. You want to do things faster, better. You want to, do upskilling. If there's a skill shortage gap, how do we find the right people, or how do we do this? But exactly what you're saying, if you ask someone, like, can you just tell me what's going on right now? No idea, right? I've been in the real estate business for far too long. It's like, real estate owners don't necessarily know exactly how many buildings they have, how much floor space they have, right? Because you're inheriting, past obsolescence, and you're perpetuating it all the time, right? So no, I mean, spot on. Understanding the assist situation, having the ability to invite to innovate, both with, AI experts or any consultants and any experts from all over the world, not be just limited by a local context. That's how you get to, the digital wins using digital twins. And with the whole idea that you do things virtually first, you test things
Right.
out digitally, and what you want to do, what you want everyone to achieve, I think, is to run these what if scenarios. So you have a
Right.
factory. What if this would look like this? What if we do this? Is this the right choice? Because that's what everyone is, struggling with, right? Making decisions. But if
Yeah.
they can
Nobody
see
wants to
that,
have to predict, right? Nicholas, no
no,
one has to
exactly. No one
predict the
wants to be
future.
wrong, right?
That's
But I mean,
right. You
like,
want to be
if
able to
you're
model it.
wrong
Yeah.
in a digital environment where nothing happens,
Yeah.
oh, I'm really happy, right? We made this decision and this how it would have turned out. Oh, I'm super lucky that we just did it in digital twin and not in the real world. And then the ultimate goal is to feed it with information, maybe then sensor data, all this kind of stuff, knowledge from the people, understanding what the impact is, and basically press, generate. Okay, generate the scenario, having done thousands of
Right.
scenarios that
Right.
lead to maximum impact for us, and visualize that. So again, you have the entire planet, you zoom out and you say, okay, show me all the factories that we have. Okay, great. And now you see them in front of you, displayed on the planet. Show me which ones are, the least performing ones. Okay, it's this one. Okay. Why is that? right? So then you get some numbers. Okay, schedule a call with all these ones and let's dig into the first one, because now you have, the scan in there, you have the real-time data, like the cameras, so you can just bring in the right people and you just, teleport into that space and let them show you, oh, it's because over here we're doing this. It's because over here we're doing that. Oh, but they actually solved this in some other country. Oh, let's bring that person in so they can weigh in, right? Because these site visits, I don't know why we're talking so much about factories, but these site visits takes a long time to coordinate, right? You need to have
Yeah.
people. It's a lot of carbon footprint. Whereas here, if you're running, these data feeds and everything in sustainable data centers that is just based on renewable information, you can just teleport in to anywhere in the world, and you can fast forward in time to see what these decisions will mean for tomorrow. But you can also rewind time and just say, okay, these decisions that we made, or maybe there's a problem with a product, you can go back in time 6 months before, 3 p.m. in this factory, something must have happened at this point on the factory line. Let's zoom into that perspective to see what happened, right? Because we can see that there was something, an error here. And this is a far cry from what the biggest companies in the world are doing in aerospace and defense, et cetera, where you don't have that drill down capacity. But you mentioned, I think at the beginning, this digital twin of organizations. That's where I believe that the digital twin organization would encompass everything.
Right.
The
Right.
data center compute that is used, so you can actually go down and say, okay, these applications that we're running here to solve these problems for ourselves or for the customer, you can trace that, like visually, there's a fine line displayed on the planet down to the very data centers and the servers and the chipsets and the racks that actually perform this compute. So if someone
Yeah.
says like, are you a green company? What's your carbon footprint? And you can say like, yeah, all our workloads are happening exactly here in this data center that is in the north of Sweden, where it's extremely, 300 megawatt data center, north of Sweden, free electricity, so super green, and it's just amazing, right? So you can show that. So it's a digital twin of the IT or the digital side of the organization, but you can also show another side, a digital twin of the customers of that organization. So it's
Right.
just
Of the
looking at the
workers,
world
of
with
of
different layers.
culture, right? Of
Exactly,
leadership,
exactly,
of people. That's what makes the
exactly.
model, a DTO model and not a DT model alone, right,
Yeah,
Nicholas, in terms of, it really does consider these, omni forces, if you will, of the organization that makes
yeah,
business work. And it's why, even when you talk about it, I think in the context of, factories and manufacturing, you can apply this in any certainly operation-centric
yeah,
organization and likely
absolutely.
well beyond that. They're having the same bottlenecks, the same, opaque issues. They have all the same challenges, right?
Yeah,
It's just a question of whether or not we can create transparency enough,
I
to
mean,
understand them.
disaster response areas, right? I took a course in development aid management 12, yeah, I don't want to even remember, but 12, 14 years ago when I was studying in Switzerland, right? And then, that was amazing because the problems that they had on the ground was communication, collaboration. They didn't like all these aid workers, they didn't really know who was in the area. Everyone else in the rest of the world didn't really know what was going on the ground. It's the same thing here. You could just see on the planet who are the organizations that actually work here. What is the state of the art? 360 cameras, just put them in the ground. You can teleport in, help them. You can actually drop down then in XR, so augmented reality, that, someone else, an expert, can drop down, let's say a 3D printer. And then you can, 3D print the house in augmented reality to figure out, is this what is needed right here? Is this the right place? And do this, digitally first. Then you can use the digital twin to display where are the sort of fiber optics cables, where is the water, the electricity, more or less everything. So you do everything virtually first. Then if you're on site, augmented reality. If you're off site, well, you can teleport in and you can bring in experts in from all over the world and working in real time or whatever that might be. Because it is the extreme collaboration perspective that exactly what you're saying. That's the whole point, that everyone is not in, their own isolated caves and working in silos. You're working with reality. And it's 3D because that's actually how we navigate in everyday world. It's not something flashy. It's what we're used to. And it's also across space and time, right? So it could be for anything. Disaster response is probably a better area, to look at depending on how you see it, or climate change or whatever that might be, than just factories. But it's just trying to paint a picture. And I worked a lot with factories. So yeah.
One of the things too that I feel like you're trying to do in elaborating some of your thinking beyond the idea of being able to visualize the current state, remove layers or other opaqueness that's in the organization. I would say key concepts to me are like zoomability, being able to kind of zoom in and zoom out in this
Yep.
transparency in order to be able to see it. But then there's some weighted ideas that it seems like you're trying to, communicate here. For example, balancing knowledge with a very weighted focus on data. Like, I feel like you're trying to put the other foot
Yeah.
down, the
Yeah,
other weight down,
absolutely.
right? To create more
Yeah.
of a balance, because you're kind of worried about it. You're worried about the
Yeah.
imbalance of it, or what is it?
No, no, no. I think like spot on. I mean, I think knowledge and wisdom beats data, all days of the week, right? You can have a connected factory that is spewing out data from every sensor and everything. But if you don't know what you're going to do with it, or if you don't know exactly what we said before, the as-is situation, if you don't know what the impact is that you're going to, what you want out of it, it doesn't really matter. So a digital
Yeah.
twin for me is just like, yeah, it's a digital replica of something that has happened, is happening, and will be in reality. But it's more the impact driven. So there's a framework from Weil and Broadbent, I think, that I read back in the day when I was studying international management and especially IT management, and it's with the benefits driven framework. So you start with benefits, outcome, or impact, and then you reverse engineer that. So what are the benefits that we actually want? What are the insights that we need? What are the decisions that we need to make to realize that benefit? By whom? What are the insight they need? Both systems as well as people. Do we have that information today within the organization or outside the organization? And then do we actually have the data to support this? It's sort of data supported, and depending on how you mean, driven maybe, but it's more like impact driven, impact led, so that you start with the outcome that you're after at any given point in time. And I think that framework is, amazing, because you start, what are the outcomes that we're after? Well, we want to save 50% money. We want to be able to onboard people, 90% faster. We want to be able to do this, this, and this, and this. Okay, what decisions do we need to take in order to achieve this? Well, we need to do this. Do we have that? So you reverse engineer yourself into data. Right now, it's trying to figure out, okay, once we have all the data, the impact is going to materialize itself. And to be honest, now in the age of, AI, and How to Compete in the Age of AI is a really good book, and you can create these foundational AI factories. If you do it correctly from the data perspective, you could actually achieve phenomenal stuff as well. But that's usually forsaking the knowledge that exists within the organization and outside. And the only thing that you need is, again, like a dumb 3D model and people, collaborating, together to figure out what the next step would be. So it's a trade-off between, okay, can we create value today in the next 2 hours versus we have to, create a phenomenal data, foundry or foundation. And that's going to take, for existing companies, years or maybe even decades, because it's across a global IT, environment where you really don't have a clue about anything. So I
Well,
think that's a really big trade-off.
I think it's a big issue too. I feel like there's a big focus on enterprise data strategy and trying to figure out the future state of our enterprise data, often without the context
Yeah.
of outcomes or
Yeah.
impact or anything else. Because that's really what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Output and impact is a context idea, and it gives
Yeah.
context to my data strategy, et cetera.
I mean, data for data's sake, or sensors or IoT and all this kind of stuff that I do love, right? I mean, I've been neck deep in all this kind of stuff for 10 years, but without impact, without context, without anything in implementation leading to impact, and, a feedback loop like, did this work? Did it not work? Without the learning capabilities or the mechanism, it's just waste of time. I mean, seriously, it is, right? I mean, the whole point with this, and I think we've seen that, at least I'm seeing this from my perspective, the world is not necessarily moving in a phenomenal direction, right? We get global warming. We got a lot more wars now, it feels like, than we had 5 years ago. It's a lot of isolation. It's a lot of silos. It's a lot of not necessarily needing to create impact. And I just want to help out in providing a different way of doing things, right? And I think half of the world's population, they don't have 5G. If you get a sunstorm and wipes out all the technology, what are we going to do then with all this AI stuff?
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I think it was yesterday again in this mobility innovation cluster that were here, and they had big companies, and they're saying like, okay, we need help from startup scale-ups in energy, intelligent processes, sustainability, these different things, right? But instead of new technology, what I believe is that companies, people, the world on its own need a new methodology. And I'm not just saying that because I've created a methodology or I've advanced a methodology that was originally created by NASA and JPL. So am I allowed to continue with this? Or
You please do.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So because I love this a lot, and I always love this, methodologies or Vitruvius virtues and all these kind of things, right? But NASA and JPL, so Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I think it was in '95, they were having more or less the same conversation that you and I are having right now. Okay, enterprise data, we have all the data, we're hoarding data, we're data hoarders, but planning space missions take, almost even longer now than it did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And maybe it's getting a little bit more complex. Maybe there's more people, but shouldn't we getting better in doing things and not worse, right? So they said like, okay, it takes
despite all the data. You're saying
despite
all the data,
despite
collecting.
progress, despite
Right.
advancements in technology or whatever that might be, are we making things easier, and are we making things more complex? And even if we're making things more complex, we should be able to make faster, better decisions faster. So they looked at this problem, and again, I love this a lot. So and said, okay, what if we, instead of all these hundreds or maybe 1,000 people that need to be involved, and project managers talking to other project managers, and emails and documents, and people are sick, and all this kind of stuff gets thrown back and forth, and then there's a problem, and then there's the feedback loops, right? So what I'm trying to get at here, like, it's the feedback loops between what is actually happening in reality and then what people are thinking that it goes on, right? That's the whole point with digital twins, that you short circuit that so you can teleport through time, and you can create this bridge. So what they did is that they identified, I think it was about 25 people, put them in the same room, and had all the information that they needed, right? So it was decision makers, mathematicians, all this kind of stuff. Everyone that they would believe are instrumental in planning these space missions, okay, in the same room, and working together. So if someone, draws something on a whiteboard or on a screen and did a calculation, the one who was supposed to get to sort of confirm this or deny this or how it would impact the other parts of the organization, they were in that room, right? So it's just a feedback loops. It's the same thing, but it's just a feedback loops that were, always there. And they went from 9 months to 9 hours of doing exactly the same thing. Right. So from 9 months to 9 hours, no data. Yeah, it was there, but it wasn't really any sensors. It was just information, and especially knowledge from all these different people that had done this before, knew exactly what they're after. So, and this concept, of course, during COVID and everything, was a little bit hard to execute on because you would stick a lot of people in the same room. Now, if you would scan a factory, turn that into a room, you don't have any limitations in space and time, right? You feed that with the information and or data them. Then you can invite to innovate with 10 people, 20 people, whatever that might be. And you run an extreme collaboration exercise. And then you can achieve what you think is going to take 9 months. You can do in 9 hours in any setting. And with when you can record this reality, you can use it for education. So someone is then, being educated in heating, ventilation, air conditioning, right? Well, they can be educated in a real world setting where you had this challenge. They can just jump in, understand what kind of systems are being used, but at the same time, someone else, just from this factory alone, can then be educated in planning, in operations, in manufacturing, in
Yeah.
heating systems, in IoT, in data strategies, in management, in all these areas. But we don't do that. And the reason I think this is so important, I mean, both the methodology and also having reality and using maybe game engines to visualize this and actually having in the way that reality looks like, is because I tried this out with my kids, right? So I was responsible for a smart heating project. We're supposed to develop self-learning, platform-independent, smart heating solutions that could go into any building, automatically understand what goes on without any previous data, and automatically reduce the carbon footprint by reducing the energy consumption on its own. Super complex, a lot of hardware, software, AI algorithms, completely new data strategy, a lot of protocols, a lot of interoperability. But we made it into Unreal Engine, which is a game engine. So we turned reality into a game. And then my kids, this is a couple of years ago, so 9 and 6 at the time, they used my computer. They teleported in, as a game, into the school that we're doing this pilot with. And I just let them roam free, right? And you had some hotkeys. So you press F1, you remove the roof. If you press F2, you can just see the heat and ventilation, air conditioning aspects. Press F3, you see the warm water moving around in the radiators, in the heating system. And 10 minutes later, or maybe it was about 3 minutes later, they were just looking down here in the apartment to the radiator here. Oh, so that's how it works, right? So then they understood that warm water comes in, it cools down, and then cold water goes out of the building. And then what is this? Oh, that's the heat and ventilation air conditioning system. So that supplies, air into, what is this? What is this? And I mean, that takes years to
Right.
even understand like a fraction of that. And here they can understand that, all these things are happening at the same time. We need to work together, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but that
I
for
think
me
it
is just
does. I
like an
mean,
epiphany instead of just looking at 2D drawings. And they would never have gotten that. But here they got something as complex as a self-learning, heating system in 30 seconds.
I feel like in addition to, trying to give some real world examples of how, visualization of the current state and understanding the current
Yeah,
state, can be exponentially valuable in terms of next steps. I feel like you're also saying we've got to be careful that if we pick at pieces of this, like we're data focused or we're technology focused or whatever, that we might not be removing important complexity. We could be adding complexity, to the existing environment, because if the game is to create better, more impactful decisions as the outcome, decisions that
yeah,
matter, relative to performance and impact at large, that, any idea alone, data alone, or anything else alone, technology alone, et cetera, runs the risk of not returning that value. And they could add a layer of complexity. We could add a layer of
yeah,
complexity,
absolutely. Absolutely.
to our environments today. And that makes a ton of sense to me. I also think it links together some other concepts that you think are basic. And I would put them under the umbrella of the important role of humans in all of this, that it
Yes.
is AI in the loop as opposed to people in the loop. And by
Yeah.
the way, I don't know why we would even want to say humans in the loop. Because the
No.
visual
For me,
is
that is, yeah,
terrible.
that's also like it's crazy, right?
It's
Like
terrible.
Skynet, 101, and I think it
Yeah.
should be humans in control, AI in the loop,
Yes.
or AI in the
Yeah.
loops, right? For a
And
lot of different
extreme
reasons.
collaboration,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you said, extreme collaboration. And this concept too, of removing intermediaries. I feel like what you were describing before in terms of, the experts are in the room. And a
Yeah.
lot of what we're removing is the handoff,
Yeah.
of, right, the handoff across our practices or processes where we've created tremendous roles for intermediaries that pass
Yeah.
things along, interpret them, filter them or whatever. And obviously, those are drags. They're drags on the decision model and impact that we're
and how
talking about
fast we
here.
can get to impact, because the world
Exactly.
is changing pretty fast.
Right.
So it's like, you're driving and then you're making decisions of what you saw in the rear view mirror like a month ago in that part of the world. You can't make any decisions about that. It's impossible. We always lead to catastrophic. I wouldn't say that. You can be lucky because some of the parts of the world, it doesn't move that fast, but the world is changing, obviously now faster than ever. So what you want to do is record reality so you can understand, okay, both having the real world, as it is in real time then, but also be able to predict that. And you do this incrementally. And I think that was the point with, again, this smart building project, because I seen that, you mostly you had to accumulate a wealth of information, but that only told you about the past. It usually didn't tell you about the present, and sure as hell not about the future. And someone says, the best predictor of future success, is past something, whatever. I'm misquoting that one. But the whole point with this was that you could go into any setting and work with an incremental learning, random forest, decision trees, especially incremental learning, that you would learn what would happen in this building right now. So you don't have access to anything else. And then you can predict the future, and then you can fine-tune it, right? And I think that's what we need to do. We could this is what is going on right now. We have that in place. And I think that is really, really important because impact is what I think everyone is after. And everything else is, impact and money, unfortunately. But if we can make it profitable, I would say, to make the climate better, to make the impact, in terms of what we need. And I think we could be there fairly soon. But there's also a lot of, moving parts at the moment, global turmoil. That's
a lot of headwinds. A lot of headwinds, challenges and headwinds to that.
Definitely.
Yeah, of what's
and I think,
possible.
Please.
No, please go ahead.
No, I just think like resiliency. That's the key, right? And sometimes we just talk about resiliency in terms of cyber attacks and attack surfaces. You have physical attack surfaces. You have digital attack surfaces, let's say for a factory or any building or whatever that might be, or hospitals in this case are extremely vulnerable at the moment for ransomware and all these kind of things. So, but it's even more than that. Again, like humans in control versus AI in the loop, that if connectivity goes out, if we don't have the AI models, and unfortunately nowadays, a lot of things are being done still in the cloud. So there's been a bunch of cloud exits during the last couple of years, even more so now, towards edge native. It is not just local control, but local intelligence. You have open source models, DeepSeek, and I think there was a Swiss model that came out right now. So you're getting a lot of resiliency in terms of you're not dependent on big cloud providers. You're not dependent on all these kind of things, right? You can use open source models, but it's even more than that. Again, going back to 2,000 years ago, when you didn't have AI, you didn't have electricity. They still built, phenomenal buildings, cities, aqueducts. So what the hell did they do then? Right. And I like the sayings of Vitruvius, who was an architect, again, like a couple of thousand years ago. And he said that, every building, and maybe it's my building whisperer that now, shines because I worked a lot with buildings, but buildings need to be three things. So it's robust, useful, and attractive. That's it, right? Robust in the sense that they have to pass the test of time. Nowadays, I think that means modular. You need to be able to replace things. You need to try things out. I've always had this idea of an app store for buildings, an app store for people, where you can try things out virtually first. And if you don't like it, just try something else, right? And useful, well, if it's a data center, it's not, for people, depending on how you see it, right? It's the KPIs. What is this building supposed to be doing? Is it built in the right place? Is it useful for its purpose? Are the racks, optimized? Or do they have enough cooling? et cetera, et cetera? Can we get 100% capacity out of them? I'm working now with GPU optimization plays, because if we can reduce the energy consumption by 50% whilst improving the performance up to 90%, it's a win-win, right? And that's the stuff that we're seeing right now in projects that is really exciting, because also from a sustainability angle. But it's also attractive. So you have these things: robust, useful, and attractive. And we saw this early on with companies like Nest, that if people don't like it, visually pleasing or understandable, we're not really going to use it, right? So it's just these three components. And I think that's something that all the products in whatever concept that we're talking about, if everything is about those three things, robust, useful, and attractive, that's when products actually will survive and actually work. And we also do make that resiliency into something that is into the very core of everything that we do.
Well, I think that you could say, in the context that you're positing here, that the idea of resiliency and sustainability is another way to say the same thing in terms
Absolutely.
of enduring value.
Absolutely.
So if we get those two ideas balanced, that seems like that goes a long way in terms of short and long-term value creation, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. Go ahead.
I'll take a concrete example from yesterday, and maybe I said this in the beginning, or maybe I said it before we started. I can't remember, but there was this challenge. Okay, so a big manufacturing organization, 100,000 people, $50 billion turnover, and they have operations in all over the world. I think like 30, 35 countries, different factories. And again, the transition that they want to make is remove themselves from fossil dependency, right, into renewables for all of their factories. And the question is, how would you do that, in the fastest amount of time possible? Because it's all contextually specific. All the different factories have different energy loads. All the different factories also have, different capacity, different, things that are happening around them. So it's not the factory, but it's the context. So one way would, of course, be, okay, let's just retrofit them and let's use SMRs, so small modular reactors. Let's just place them at every factory. There you have it. Done, right? Maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe not. The other one is that you have the entire planet, you plot them out, and then the whole point of this is to, let's say, generate all these different scenarios. So you bring in GIS data, you bring in the context, you bring in the BIM models, and let's say you have all the different factories, in your complete digital twin of the entire planet, all the information, et cetera, et cetera. The whole point now is that, okay, in all the compute spend that you have, you can visualize, you can see that it's running in these data centers that is, again, with almost free electricity. So it's based on renewables. So the simulations that you're going to make in, the outcome that you want, show me, what if scenarios, show me how we can make all of our factories into net positive, or, how they can be. And then you can just visualize this. Okay. Again, this is how you should do it here. This is how you should do it here. And then you can just invite the experts and, does this actually make sense? So yeah, this actually works. The components are going to come from here. These installers are going to do it. Let's try this virtually first in this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And now you have the roadmap. You have the visual roadmap that you can articulate and explain and visualize to all the different stakeholders, because you have an agreed definition of what is, because you record in reality. But you also have an agreed definition of what will be, because it's there. You can see the SMR outside. You can see that it's not a diesel, generator anymore. You can see that this is exactly what it will look like. You can see the ones who are supposed to do it. And then you can also test it out if it works. So I think that's, again, the capabilities of digital twins, that not only knowledge, but that's how you start. And then you try out things. You can then add sensor data. So you get the real-time component. So the physics-based environment sort of updates on its own. And then you can, again, perpetuate this wisdom because you have everything recorded, right? So I don't know if that makes sense, or am I just, hallucinating, as LLMs tend to do as well. But I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I feel like what you're describing was a question that I was going to bring up before we move into this. How do we design organizations of the future to do the things that we're talking about? Because one of my last questions was, where does strategy fit? And I think you're answering that question. I feel like what you're describing is a methodology that says, we understand and can visualize transparently the current state, but you're not putting a North Star down, Nicolas. Like you're putting down North Star such that, you're still able to then, move left to right, right to left, and then the roadmap to go back again, which I think is an important idea because the North Star is what creates the context for modeling future state scenarios that could be achievable to that, because we're asking to achieve what? Right? To achieve that.
Exactly.
And, that's, I think, how the whole model then strings together, making the current state really useful, but we're not sailing as a momentum idea exclusively left to right and then bumping into whatever we bump into along the way.
Right? I love that, right? It's this sort of, again, you can go back in time and go forward in time.
Exactly.
So that's the point, right? You're not limited to space and time whatsoever. Right. You borrow things from the future.
Right.
That's what you're doing, right? You're borrowing things because you know that, we want to run everything on renewables. We want to be able to use AI for more or less everything.
Right. We have aspirations.
Exactly. Yeah. So we know that this is where we want to end up. Right. But again, then it's sort of this pendulum. What are we right now? What do we want to do? We need to check in. And also we were only talking about the sort of digital twin of the organization, but the whole black swan aspects, that you don't necessarily understand what's going to happen because you're also, having the digital twin of the entire context, your operating context.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So what happens now in this country? We have this idea. Okay, you can't implement like a small modular reactor. Okay, fair enough. Let's do another simulation based on the new tariffs or the new legal interoperability perspective. And I think, interoperability, don't get me started. I love that because it's I think that's also where everyone, they don't understand, right? They're focusing on the technical interoperability. It doesn't matter these days, to be honest. I mean, you have the, how do systems communicate with each other? And then you end up with more and more standards and becomes like crazy. And then you have like semantic interoperability. I mean, should I talk about this? I think it's fun. I don't know if your audience does, to be honest, but.
Well, listen, I feel like where you're, I just want to make sure that I connect the dots here.
Sure.
I feel like what you're trying to talk about is this concept that we were talking about before, not an overemphasis on data. We've got to get this balance with the important concepts of knowledge. And I feel like what you're pointing to, if I'm hearing you correctly, is, not, technical interoperability alone. Matter of fact, that's probably not the thing to have to, lose sleep over, the thing to lose sleep.
I know a lot of people that are losing sleep and have lost a lot of sleep.
I know. But it's hopping on one leg, right? I mean, your point is that it's hopping on one leg relative to, bringing in the other important factors.
If you don't have impact in the same room, it's all just discussions. It doesn't mean really anything. And if you don't have the people responsible for the money, to get this stuff done either, it's also like a moot exercise, right? Because I think that's also, I see that today, right? You do things in isolation, do things in silos, you end up, 12 months later, say like, okay, it didn't really work that well, or even better, it worked amazing. But you have these diagrams and you did this, but maybe this is not something that you should be doing because the impact for other projects, this is the wrong way to do things. And again, that's the problem. You don't have, the money people involved all the time. And we were, discussing this yesterday, that everything, I believe, is a CFO play, to be honest, So we see that, okay, we have this global organization, have digital twin of everything. We can look at all these kind of things, right? But if you have just like, okay, the CFO aspect, say, what costs us the most money right now, right? Or where are we making money? How can we see, make more money than what we're doing today? Or how can we find new revenue streams? Because money leads, and if you also incorporate the parameters of, say, the sustainability resiliency, because they're imbued into the decision-making fabric, right? Then you can't go wrong, probably is an overstatement of a lifetime.
But if they're not, right? Or if they're not, you're going to have a hard time, creating the argument for it, right? I mean, you might be able to push that rock up the hill, but that's going to be difficult,
but then you're going to end up losing money because you're going to be hit by a lot of different things. So if you have...
we've seen that.
incorporate the parameters, sustainability. I love what you said, the almost the equation mark to resiliency. But, driving that through where can we find more money, right? Or
Yeah.
how can we do this? Then whatever you put in front of, well, the same person that has been involved since day one, of course they're going to go ahead. If we know that this is how we're going to save money, if we know exactly how we're going to make more money, it's a win, right? So I don't know why, but that's been left out from the conversation. And again, you treat technology, AI as something separate. But if you don't tie it to a budget, and again, can advocate or can make the argument or can, defend this, it's never going to be made into a decision. Maybe if you're lucky, if you're a good salesperson, maybe. But then, it's definitely not going to lead to the impact. So I think the CFO play and the money play from a digital twin perspective is really exciting and interesting, and just using digital twins to, show me the pathway, what we need to do in order to make, 100% more money the next year than what we're doing today. And I
So
think
are you
that's,
saying,
yeah,
when
please.
you're saying that, because, of course I agree with the point, and I think that we've got to tie all of our major investments to performance and market play, right? That's obviously
Yeah.
what you mean. But are you pointing to this just quickly, and then I want to get into the org stuff, but I want to make sure I hear this as a potential obstacle. Like, are you
Yep.
saying that in your experience, you see challenges with digital twin, strategies moving forward because the business case isn't being made adequately enough in terms of the ROI? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
absolutely.
Okay.
And I think
Okay.
the whole conception of digital twins is also bad, right? I mean, it's a new word for most people. This is new. No, no, no. And if you just call it like a modern asset management platform
Yeah.
or a modern collaboration platform or whatever that might be, then you're home, right? You don't need to educate someone. It's not that scary. But irrespective if it's a digital twin project or not, that's a yes. I mean, like, if you don't anchor it in reality, and if you don't know how it's going to save money, make more money, or find new revenue streams for any organization, of course you're going to have a hard sell in, to the ones that, with the money or to the board. And I think that has to be there
Yeah.
definitely somewhere.
I
Yeah.
think you're making a good point. I mean, this is where I can weigh in a bit in terms of, my vantage point. I come in from the strategy side, working with
Yeah.
the C-suite on strategy, and I think it would be much more effective to position the concepts of a DTO, in terms of business case, as a matter of strategy, as a
Yep.
matter of, doing strategic foresight as a methodology and process in a different, more living, real-time way.
Yep.
That's a compelling argument, because the biggest gap that we run into is the bridge between strategy and execution, because it's a
Yep.
road too far, Nicholas. It's a road too
Exactly.
far.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The strategic plan is too far away, and the current state is in a state of disarray. In
Yep.
some way or another, it's in a state of, serious disarray at times. Maybe 50% of it understood and 50% of it not understood.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely. If
what I
you're
mean?
lucky. If
If
you're
you're lucky.
lucky.
And then I've
Yeah,
got to move
absolutely.
that,
Yeah.
from here to there, and not make it look like a snowball's chance in hell. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, no, no, no.
So really?
That's the whole point, right? If you look in the C-suite and you have a board of directors or C-suite or top managerial teams or whatever that might be, right? And then you have in front of everyone, again, here's the planet. Everyone can agree on that, right? Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Here's all our offices. Here are all our customers displayed on the map. Here's how much money we make for each, units, each nation, each this and this and this. This is a profit and loss statement, just visualized. Okay. And then you can, okay, so why doesn't it go well here? Well, we had these losses. So you have the shared reality, no Excel sheets, they're supporting, right? So it's basically a visual, I would say, database where you just
Yeah.
pump in the information from all the SBUs, so the strategic business units, into this, shared reality. So you can just look at that and then say, okay, well, again, go back 6 months. What do we have done? Well, go back to when we started. Okay, so you see that here was the headquarter. Then we open up here, 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 and here, and here. So you just press play. So then you can say, okay, now we're here. This year we're, about to make this amount of money. But then again, like you said, right, it's a foresight and it's a strategy tool. Okay, where are we going to go in next year? And then you can ask the people, or you
Right.
can ask the digital twin, supported then with, large language models or large quantity models or whatever you want. And they say, well, based on all the stuff that is happening in APAC or African continent or, aging population here, whatever that might be, we've done the calculations and this is what it looks like,
Yeah.
right? Visualizing here, we need to open up offices. Here, we need to hire those people. Here are really cool projects. We shouldn't go here. That was the obvious choice before, but now this happens, so we're not going to do this. And then everyone just looks at something that everyone understands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone would
It's like,
understand that.
no, everyone would get it. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think to the C-suite, you can position this rightfully as, a strategic approach. I'd say methodology, but others might say approach, a strategic approach that balances risk with a growth strategy.
Yeah.
Balances risk with a growth strategy. In an AI, capable world.
Yeah, because it would be supported by LLMs. And I think like if the one has been listened this for this long, I don't know how much this has been cut down, but what I'm going to say now is actually where the future is heading, right? So I think right
So you're
now,
like, don't cut this one, please.
yeah, exactly. I'm saying this to the team, right? Please don't cut this stuff. The other stuff, maybe. But what we're seeing right now is a little bit of an AI burst or bubble bursting. At least that's what Accenture, documents are saying and all these kind of things, right? And it's not an AI bubble that is bursting. Absolutely not. It's an LLM bubble, right? So large language models. So
Yeah.
what is happening right now is looking at it, there's the peak of inflated expectations, the whole Gartner hype cycle, right? So that's, AI bubble, and we've seen that goes down. But this is where digital twins will shine because you're working with reality. And again, you might work with real-time data, but you work with physics-based aspects. So we could dream all we wanted when we did the smart building platform, and someone could say that, yeah, it's working really well, as in the sensor is doing stuff. But if we didn't get, spot on 21 degrees or 20 degrees in that room, nothing was working, right? The hardware could be working, the sensors could be working, the AI could be working, it could predict stuff, it could be flawless. But if we don't see the impact, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I
so
mean, you're really,
yeah, because
you're really making the point that I was
yeah.
making about execution,
Yeah.
Nicholas, and I think that's the transition that people are looking for.
Yeah.
I need to move from the hype into an operating model
Yeah.
roadmap, an operating model roadmap, very concrete. How would I deliver this? How would my operations change? What does it mean to live in an ecosystem that looks like this? We need to be able to get it into execution, which I think is, what you're offering as the
and getting
idea.
there faster, right?
Yeah.
So much faster, preferably if you've already done it 10,000 times before, so you don't need to spend 500 years in the real world, but you can actually do that in the virtual copy. But if you look at, okay, there's a hill right now, peak inflating expectations with LLMs, that's, going down. Well, what's going up is LQMs, so large quantitative models, right? So that's when you have reality as the judge, jury, and, decision maker. Because then you see, okay, this did actually work. Yes, it did. Okay, what do we do? Right? What do we do to get there? What LLMs did we use? What kind of business rules? What kind of all this kind of stuff? So if you look at the most sophisticated multi-agentic platforms that I know of, and I know quite a lot of them, they're absolutely amazing. Used for like the top 3 mining companies in the world. And the reason why they're paying $10 million is in a licensing fee for these companies is because the skill shortage gap, right? They can just get started, and LLMs, 8 to 12%. Everything else is, knowledge coming out from people, knowing about the industry, business rules, business process management, everything else that, provides the scaffolding where LLMs can provide a little bit, but then when you have real-time data to support this, so LLMs can try this stuff out and hypothesize about, this should happen, but then you get a really interesting feedback loop from the real world back to LLMs and, in a repository that then would, continuously self-learn and find out what the actual, what works and what does not work. And you have,
Yeah.
again, the physics-based reality always there. So you're not guessing, right? And I think that's the point with digital twins, that you have instantaneous feedback loops of what you think will happen, what is happening, and continuously learn. And then, be able to do that. If you have a visual ways of working, you can explain this to people. You can have an API to other systems, and you can use whatever AI that you want inside the factory, inside the car, not just in data centers. And you create ultimately more resiliency much, much, much faster. And that's
Right.
where you go to foundational AI models that can really, really scale and not be dependent on, proprietary ways of working. So as a company, you don't have the risk, right? Because you retain the knowledge, you generate the knowledge, you deliver the knowledge, and you implement it, and you do it faster, and you learn from what actually works. And that will create, this, really digital business models, digital operating models, where you improve scale, scope, and learning for everyone.
I like that. I like the idea too of tying it to scaling talent,
Yeah,
because that's a huge obstacle, as you well know, in terms of businesses. Not only talent coming in, but unfortunately knowledge going out.
yeah,
Right. So
absolutely. And that's such a
there's
big
this
risk for
problem.
companies.
Huge risk.
You kick someone
Huge
out that's
risk.
been there for 20 years, or a consultant leaves, and
Yeah.
everything is out, right? And I
Exactly.
think that's one of the major points with it. Doesn't come with data. That is knowledge. You retain knowledge within the organization, because what is going to happen of the factory, whatever that might be, they can just go in, right? You invite an expert that is an expert in IoT. They look at what is going on, take 1 hour and say like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. How the hell do you know? Well, I worked with these systems, 500 times. It doesn't work. You can try all you want. They're never going to, succeed. What actually happened last year is that we used this system and then we use this one. So this will work. That's 5 minutes of an expert's time where you have the knowledge. You can invite to innovate. You can properly explain what the problem is, not just PowerPoints, Excel sheets. You invite them into the reality that you have, irrespectively if it's a factory in Sweden, if it's a mine in whatever, if it's a person, that with the context of they ate this yesterday, they fell down 2 years ago, they have this origin, this is the DNA report, here's a 3D digital twin of them, here's the simulations that we tried, we think that this is the one. Okay, you have 5 experts working together, and now you can do, more things that, you can do in a 5 minutes than you would have been doing in, 5 years, right?
Nicholas, one concept that I'd just like to get on the table before we end, and I'm going to have you come back to talk about designing organizations that, run and manage these types of strategies and executions, because you've got some interesting ideas and model there. But one of the things that I've been talking about recently that I think is part of your thinking here, and want to just get your opinion on the table, is this idea of the important role in future state organizations of orchestration,
Oh yeah,
not
yeah.
authority orchestration, and the concept of leaders becoming orchestrators of these new environments, in these new environments. Can you just comment on your thinking on that for a couple of minutes?
Maybe. I think give me a clear example of, what would the challenge be? What kind of organization or
Well, it goes along with the idea of organizational silos, organizational hierarchies, and the decision-making structures that work inside those, which tend to be authority-driven,
yeah,
top-down driven. So as we move more towards, a concept of, balancing innovation,
yeah,
with today's operations and the context of the business today,
yeah. I'll
there
try
needs to be new roles and new
to
ways
take
of
a stab
working.
at it, right? And
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
I studied international management back in the day, and we had this, transactional leadership styles. We had transformational leadership styles. You have, Mintzberg's 5 different models of how organizational structures look like. You have, let's say, Harvard University or hospitals. You have professional bureaucracies where you have the fiefdoms and the kings and the queens that basically are, untouchable. You can't really do anything, right? You have machine bureaucracies like McDonald's, like these ones that they're supposed to do exactly the same, everywhere you are, right? And then you have a bunch of holacracies. You have, a lot of different things, right? With the sense of digital twins, and I think maybe you're asking this because I posted the other day on LinkedIn about software-defined automation and software-defined manufacturing, and also what that means when it comes to the organizational capabilities of actually making decisions faster together, right? Irrespective if you have a matrix organization, someone decides at the top or someone needs to have this joint collaboration efforts, it doesn't really matter when you have complete transparency with all the different layers of the organization, right? So I'll take the software-defined manufacturing as an example, if that makes sense. So for me, the comparison to what you're saying is that in Sweden, we have this really extreme consensus, not collaboration, but consensus way, right? Everyone has to
Yeah.
agree. It takes forever because the reality has changed and then you need to start over again. So from a silo perspective, we have really great companies that really great with innovation because, we can think for ourselves. We don't have, I would say, that much respect for, the authoritative, perspective. It's not really like that. Whereas maybe in the US, in Asia Pacific, in Germany, it's more about, the boss is the boss and they're the ones that decide exactly what will happen, right? And I think like with this new orchestration capabilities, especially utilizing digital twins, it becomes much, much easier to have people responsible because you can drill down. Again, we take the factory floor, for instance, right? Usually that is very opaque. You have opaque layers. If you look at it from the top of the organization, the boardroom or the top managerial team, they're very far away sometimes, of course, from the factory floor, right? Which creates, benefits to some extent, but also challenges because sometimes you want to make decisions here. We're not really there, at the factory floor. And at the factory floor, you're thinking like, why the hell are they making these brain dead decisions? We're struggling here, right? We can't even do this, and this, and this.
Right.
If you again have the entire planet, and then you zoom in, you have a scan of the factory. So you have everything in 3D, as well as the context. So you can see, what's happening outside. You have cameras. And then you bring in someone from the board, the cybersecurity person, the marketing person, the head of the factory floor, technician, smart building expert, everyone into that call, right? Now, again, you can see everything together. It's completely transparent. You don't need to do the whispering game that you're gonna, try to get this down. You're gonna force it down, and then the factory manager, they're gonna quit anyway, right? So they don't really care. But now you can hold everyone accountable. In this meeting alone, in a Teams meeting where you share your screen and you move in, it's just like, what is your opinion of this? Right? You can ask someone, oh, it's this is okay. What do you say about this? Because you're seeing the same thing for the first time, right? You're seeing the factory. You can zoom in on different things. Okay. And then someone say, oh, well, we made this decision because the other factories, right, that the factory floor, the boss of the factory, they of course just care about their factory. They don't know that for all the other factories, this decision has been implemented. They all have different systems, right? It's only this factory alone that have these systems. Even if it works well, it becomes such a huge cost, right? So then, the ones that are making decisions a little bit higher, they can make the argument, okay, if we zoom out, you can now see that, this is the reason for why we're doing this. And this is, again, this is, then they can have an understanding. And I think if everyone then gets the buy-in, he can then also own this, right? This is where we want to be heading. How would you do this in this factory? Well, I would do it like this, this, and this, and this, and this. We will see these results. And then you can delegate this and you can orchestrate, these leadership, perspectives in a much, much more transparent way. So even if you have that, the boss is the boss and they make these decisions, they can drill down and not be limited by these opaque systems. And even if you have a matrix organization or a consensus-based organization, that makes it even better, to be honest, because you can make decisions together faster and not having the slowness of, everyone needs to agree. So first the factory floor has to, do something, present that up top. and then it goes back, and then the whole reality has changed. So I think like for me, again, digital twins is the way of the future because you're working with reality. Everyone can see what everyone is doing.
When everybody else can see. And I like the point that you made, which I really wasn't thinking about, that the shift from, the current state of decision-making, and I say authority, to orchestration, really works in other contexts as well. Less productive consensus building versus highly productive orchestration. So the right side is the right side no matter what the left.
Yeah, no, and I think like my cousin, he used to be on the board of ABB. So ABB is a big organization. At the end of his career, he was responsible for like 20,000 people out of Hong Kong. And he said this, and now he's retired, so I can say this. But, in Sweden, they try to make decisions for him, right? They say like, no, I'm not going to follow what you're seeing in Sweden because you're so far away from the reality that I'm in, whether that was in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, or in Hong Kong. So he just made those decisions, right? And that was, again, like the difference between Sweden. No one can make these decisions on their own and, try to make that happen. But in China, at least, back then, this is like 20 years ago, he could make a decision and he would almost know that everyone down would follow that decision. So if he moved right, everyone would move right. He said also the importance of actually going down to the factory floor. Now, obviously, he went down and traveled to all the different factories, right? He went down and traveled to and talked to everyone. And that took weeks, months, years to do that for 20,000 people. It's that's what people are doing still, right? If we had a digital twin strategy, he could, visualize all the different factories. He could bring in all the factories next to each other. He could have a virtual factory visit day where almost like everyone in the organization could just go in and see what is being done in all the different factories. He can, do that virtually first. He could take all the different, heads of all the different factories, get them on a call, and for them to show him, what did you do yesterday? What went wrong? What is good? What is bad? And he could do that, before lunch, right? So it's exactly the same things that everyone is doing today, I would guess. But I mean, it's just that you're not limited to space and time. And I think that's where it becomes really interesting that, again, we're just working with reality. Everyone is working with reality, but we're just making it difficult today because we're removing reality out of the equation and just looking at systems and all of other things.
If we take that as a perspective, even a definition, as I wrap this up, and I am going to ask you to come back and talk to me separately about the organizational models, because I think our folks would be very interested in that. But the concept that you're saying in terms of digital twins, is almost first a strategy and, perhaps ways of thinking and working before it's a digital twin infrastructure, if I could say it like that, before it's actual infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a strategy, right?
I would say like, it's a way of life, right? No, but I mean, it's a philosophy, it's a methodology,
exactly.
But the digital twin, again, going back to the conversation this morning, they had a 3D model of the factory, but they were only using it for planning, right? In isolation. So everyone had different 3D models of the same thing that everyone's using on their own. But they were never using it for operation, for follow-up. So I think like in addition to what you said about the methodology or the strategy, it's sort of a project, what do you call it? Project methodology, or like a project way of, dealing with projects so that you always work in the digital copy of whatever it is that you're looking at, right? So it's not the infrastructure like you're saying.
No,
it's the sort of like the vehicle, that you're using.
Like the basis, from which decisions are made. That makes sense to me. In that context, by that definition, what would you say, in kind of closing comments here, that business leaders who are listening to this might be able to do in terms of practical first steps that would move them towards essentially building these capabilities? At the end of the day, it's capability building, right? Building capabilities that might provide, the benefits that we've been talking about.
I mean, the first step is, again, just if you can dust off, you have this old globe of the world, or you go into Google Maps or Google Earth, especially, and just think about your world from that perspective, right? That's sort of like the first thing. Where's my home? Oh, it's here. Where do I go to work? Well, that's here. The company that I'm running or the company I'm working for, where do they actually have operations, right? Just anchor everything in the real world and think about it like that. If you're taking a meeting with someone on the other side of the world, imagine that, you're transporting yourself. So anchor everything in reality. I think that's the first thing that I would say to everyone, because we're not really doing that. And then if you have information about a customer, where are they on the planet? If you have information about your factory, your headquarters, whatever that might be, have the information tied to that building, to that factory, all these kind of things. So like anchor everything in reality, start there, because then whenever you want to explain what you're thinking to someone, they will understand, right? If you say like, okay, the cybersecurity aspects or this strategy, these are the risks.
Yeah.
Show
It's a
me.
common language,
Yeah,
right? Right,
show
Nicholas,
me.
it's a common
Show me
language.
what you mean, right?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here? Oh, okay, I'm talking about headquarters in this company here. Where are they? Oh, okay, Mimi is there. Nicholas is here. Okay. So what is the problem again? Show me.
Right.
Don't tell me. Show me. All the time, whenever anyone is in a call, open up the planet and just, show me and, anchor it there. Then it becomes explainable. And I mean, we haven't really talked about the knowledge transfer into AI agentic stuff and all this other really cool stuff. But I think that maybe that's for part 2, where we go into when you actually have a digital twin, what can you do? Right?
Yeah, I love it. I really feel like what we're saying is that if you can create a view of reality today, you've created this beachhead, right? And from the beachhead, which is the way that you talk, Nicholas, just so you know, you then blur the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? In terms of, how we think about, those contexts relative to potential future moves. Now we have the advantage. We have the advantage of a wide range of past, present, and future knowledge and ideas that can come to play to ask the question, to help answer the question, what if we? What if we blah, blah,
what if we do this?
What if we blah, blah, blah?
Again, like the whole point is to generate this. Like, show me how to get there. Show me how to get the maximum impact. And then basically say, don't just show me, execute on it, right?
Yeah.
And then have people, AI systems working together to deliver maximum impact at record speed in explainable ways.
Well, that's it. Listen, I'm just gonna zip it, because there's nothing I can say that's better than that. And as an ending, Nicholas, thank you for coming. I really do want you to come back, when you've got some time, and to help me with the discussion of the digital twin organization and systems and structures we're seeing there. You've got a fascinating point of view. So thank you for your time. Thanks for coming. And I'm sure my guests will love this. I did.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can find me on LinkedIn if you need me for anything. That's usually where I operate. And if you have any questions,
and can I say from personal experience, you answer. So if people reach out to you on LinkedIn, you're very good about that. So I encourage folks to do that, and we'll provide that information when we do the intro piece too.